When I was a cop in the 80s and 90s, we did not put up with this crap, not for 1 minute. I live in a country where wrong has become right and right has become wrong, and I am old enough to remember when that was not the case. I saw an 80-year-old woman trying to make herself small. If you've ever been around predators, you know that look. It's the look of someone hoping to become invisible so they don't get hurt. I was driving through a shopping center on my way to the bank, and as I passed a pharmacy, I noticed an older woman, looked to be like, I guess, in her 80s, with her head cast down and her shoulders a bit forward and dropped down, and making herself look small. A transient was standing close to her right, and looked like he was saying something to her. He had a backpack, looked dirty and unkempt. I thought, something don't look right there. I kept driving and drove down several parking aisles away and parked. And I did that because I didn't want him to see which car I got back into and didn't want him to get my license plate number. I approached and walked up to her, stood in front of her, and said, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She raised her head slightly, but didn't speak, and she rolled her eyes to the right, to her right, which is where he was standing. I thought, okay. So I positioned myself and stood to her right, between her and the transient. And I asked her quietly, "Do you feel safe?" She whispered, "No." I told her I'd stay with her, and that I wouldn't let him hurt her, and that she was safe. I asked her what had happened. She said that her husband had dropped her off at the pharmacy to pick up some medication for him, and then he went for a short drive. He hadn't gone in with her because he wasn't able to walk without assistance. As I'm talking with her, the transient says to me, "It's none of your business." And I looked at him and said, "It is now." I continued talking to her, and she said when she walked out of the pharmacy and stood in front of it to wait for her husband to pick her up, the transient walked up to her and asked her for money. She said she was polite to him and said she was sorry, but she didn't have any money to give him. She said he stood closer to her, kept asking for money, and she felt afraid, and he wouldn't leave her alone. He was using his size and demeanor to intimidate her, make her feel afraid, and extort money from her. He said, in a bit of a threatening tone, "You can leave now." I said, "I'm not leaving." So I just chatted with her, told her I'd stay with her until her husband picked her up, and I'd make sure that he didn't follow them when they left. And he said again, a little bit more forcefully, "You can leave now." It lit me, y'all. Lit me. I turned to him and said, "Look, she did not start this problem. I did not start this problem. You started this problem. And now you don't get to dictate the rules of engagement. That time has come, and that time has gone now. Feel me?" Thug Boy just stares at me. Everything he said to me was just white noise. I could not have cared any less than I did about what he said or what he wanted. Look, I'm no badass or fearless woman. I'm not. I felt the adrenaline. I felt the fear. But there's a difference between feeling fear and being afraid of a coward. I wasn't there to start a problem. I was there to stop one. I just stood right next to her, told her she was safe and that everything would be okay. Then he repeats again, "You can leave now." So I told him, "I will leave after she leaves, and I make sure you don't follow him. That's when I will leave. Or, I will leave after the police arrive. Would you like me to call them?" His response? Crickets. Why? Because bullies and thugs are spineless cowards through and through. They only target people they think are weaker than they are, and they victimize them. And make no mistake, they look for you. That is their job. They are not crazy. They are not mentally ill. They are calculated predators looking for their next prey. They are fully aware that what they're doing is wrong, and they know exactly how to use your fear against you. Your fear feeds them. They use fear to intimidate you into complying with whatever they want. They break the law today simply because the law became a suggestion, because it isn't enforced anymore. Thug Boy would never pull this crap on a big, beefy man. He and his friends target the old, the frail, the vulnerable, because they know damn well that a 30-year-old man in his prime will break their effing jaw. And that's how you know they are weak to their core and pathetic cowards. I was not going anywhere until she and her husband drove off, and he remained where I was. I didn't want him getting on a bike if he had one and riding after them. There just weren't a lot of options I had, and I wanted things safe and peaceful. Now, I need to say this clearly. I would not recommend anyone do what I did. I recommend that if you see something like that, you do not intervene. But don't just be a bystander who does nothing either. My recommendation is that you call the police immediately and report it. Stay a safe distance away. If you can continue to observe, do it, but only if you remain completely safe. Let the police handle the issue. Don't put yourself at risk of danger, harm, or injury. That's what the police are for. And unlike you, they have a lot of friends that will show up and help them. When I was a cop in the 80s and 90s, if I got a call, or any other officer got a call, about somebody loitering, panhandling, trespassing, or someone bothering, annoying, or obstructing citizens, we responded, contacted the person, ran them for warrants, told them we got a call on them, why we got a call, and that what they were doing was illegal. If they had warrants, we hooked them and booked them. If they were compliant, we typically gave them a courtesy warning. We were not required to give them a warning, though. But if we did, we told them to stop, to leave, and don't do it again. If they were not cooperative and compliant, they went to jail. But if I gave them a warning, or any other officer gave them a warning, and then we had a repeat call, a return call on the same person for the same thing, we showed up, arrested them, put cuffs on them, and took them to the Gray Bar Motel, also known as the jail. People who cannot or will not follow the laws should not be out in our society, period. We did not negotiate with them back then. You only negotiate with criminals in a hostage situation. And guess what? We are currently in a hostage situation. Our communities and streets are being held hostage by thugs and criminals, while our police have been hemmed in and made ineffectual because our politicians and elites will not let them do their jobs. They will not let police enforce the laws. In the state I live in, the laws have become mere suggestions, and the transients and criminals get to decide if and when they want to follow the laws. But us regular citizen normies get a fine or jail if we violate the laws. Why? Because we have money to pay the fine and get out of jail. None of this is right, and none of this should be happening. Think about it, y'all. The people who work to support themselves and their families, and who actually pay the taxes that run this dump called America, are the only people who are required to follow the laws. The transients and criminals, and politicians and elites, all of whom actually run our country and decide what is fair and right, are the only people who don't pay any taxes. The people making our laws, the politicians and the elites, are not the people following the laws, and they don't care that the thugs, transients, and criminals aren't either. Evil flourishes where good people do nothing, and it has. Left to its own devices and way, evil procreates, takes over, and encroaches into everything it itself is not. We are there now. Do you feel safer? I don't. Take what helps you, leave the rest.